Welcome to AutoStats. Sometimes in the car world, you run into a technology that seems like a total contradiction. And right now, nothing fits that description better than hydrogen. It's one of the biggest, most talked about failures in passenger cars, and at the exact same time, it's one of the most promising technologies for the future of heavy transport. So, what's the real story? Is it the future, or is it a flop? Well, the honest answer is, it's both. Let's dive in and figure out why. Let's start with this number, 210. That is the total number of Toyota Mirai hydrogen cars sold in the entire United States in 2025. Just 210. Now, think about this. In a market where we buy almost 16 million new vehicles a year, that number isn't just small, it's basically a rounding error. It's almost impossible to overstate just how tiny that is. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote is from Toyota's own technical chief, Hiroki Nakajima. He publicly admitted that the Mirai has, quote, not been successful. You know things are bad when the company that actually builds the car comes right out and says, yeah, this isn't working out. So how in the world did we get here? Because on paper, the technology is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it promises the best of both worlds, electric driving with gas station convenience. But to really get why it failed, you first have to understand that promise. And it all starts with how a fuel cell actually works. The process itself is actually pretty amazing and really elegant. A hydrogen car is an EV, but it's an EV that makes its own electricity on the fly. You see, hydrogen from the tank flows in and hits this special membrane. That membrane splits the hydrogen atoms, forcing the electrons to go on a detour through a circuit. And that flow of electrons is electricity. It's that simple. After that, everything combines with plain old oxygen from the air, and the only thing that comes out the tailpipe is pure water. In this slide, this just lays out the conflict perfectly. The dream on the left is what everyone wanted. 5-minute fill-ups, great range, 0 emissions. But the reality on the right is a total nightmare. There are basically no stations to be found. The running costs are unbelievable, and sales have just fallen off a cliff. The promise and the reality couldn't be farther apart. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Why did this amazing-sounding tech fail so spectacularly in the real world for people like you and me? Well, it really boils down to a few critical and frankly unavoidable problems. The first reason is cost. And this number right here, this is the real killer. Based on current prices in California, where hydrogen costs around $36 a kilogram, it costs about 50 cents a mile to drive a Toyota Mirai. 50 cents. Let me put that in perspective for you because it's pretty shocking. It costs 10 times more per mile to drive than a Nissan Leaf that you just plug in at home. But here is the part that is absolutely insane. It is cheaper to fuel a gas-guzzling 10-cylinder Dodge Viper than it is to run a zero-emission Toyota Mirai. Just let that sink in. One of the least efficient sports cars ever made costs less to fuel. That alone makes owning one completely unsustainable. You know, it wasn't just one thing that went wrong, it was really a perfect storm of 3 major failures. First, you have the classic chicken and egg problem. Nobody builds stations because there are no cars, and nobody buys cars because there are no stations. Second, the economics of just making hydrogen are terrible. And third, while all this was happening, battery technology just got better and cheaper way faster than anyone expected and simply left hydrogen in the dust. All right, so with everything we've seen, the awful sales, the crazy costs, the lack of stations, it would be so easy to just write hydrogen off completely, to say, okay, it's a flop, end of story. But what if I told you that's only half the story? What if the failure in cars is actually hiding a huge success somewhere else? Because the story completely flips on its head when we stop talking about your driveway and start talking about the highway. For heavy-duty commercial transport, I'm talking about the big Class 8 semi-trucks that move everything. Hydrogen isn't just promising, it's already here. And by the way, if you're curious about how hydrogen might work in other areas like shipping or aviation, we dropped some links to great resources for you down in the description. This table really says it all. For cars, batteries just work. A battery pack's weight is a totally manageable part of a 4,000-pound sedan. But try to power a massive semi-truck with batteries for a long-haul route, and that battery pack can weigh up to 20,000 pounds. That's 10 tons of just batteries. And in the world of logistics, every single pound of battery is a pound of cargo you can't carry and can't get paid for. So for trucking, all of hydrogen's weaknesses as a car fuel suddenly become its greatest strengths. A fuel cell system is way lighter than those giant batteries, which means more payload. Refueling takes minutes, just like diesel, not hours, which eliminates costly downtime. And you don't need a station on every corner. A big fleet just needs fueling at its own depots. All of the biggest problems just vanish. And make no mistake, this is not just a theory on a whiteboard. This is happening right now. Toyota is engineering fuel cells for trucks that are designed to last 600,000 miles. Hyundai is already shipping real hydrogen semis to fleets in the US. And Honda is actually starting production of commercial fuel cell systems right here in America. These are massive, real-world investments. Okay, so hydrogen works for trucks. Great. But there's a huge catch we absolutely have to talk about. Just because the truck's tailpipe only emits water doesn't mean the fuel is actually clean. We have to ask the most important question: where is all this hydrogen coming from? And this is the uncomfortable truth. As you can see, a whopping 95% of all hydrogen produced today is what's called gray hydrogen. It's made from natural gas in a process that releases a ton of CO2. A vehicle running on gray hydrogen is often no better for the climate than a modern hybrid. And that truly green stuff we hear about, it's less than 1% of the world's supply. For hydrogen to actually live up to its environmental promise, we need this, green hydrogen. It's made by splitting water using renewable energy, like wind or solar. It's truly zero carbon. The only problem? It's still really, really expensive. The big goal is to get that cost down to $1 a kilogram, but we are a long, long way from that today. All right. We've looked at this spectacular failure in passenger cars and the surprising promise in heavy trucking. We've seen the tech, the economics, and the big environmental catch. So let's pull all these threads together and deliver the final verdict on hydrogen. If you remember just one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this simple sentence. Hydrogen's future is not in your driveway. It's on the highway, powering the massive trucks that move our entire economy. So what we have are two completely separate realities for hydrogen. For passenger cars, the debate is pretty much over. Battery EVs won. The infrastructure works for them, the economics are better, and hydrogen just couldn't keep up. But for commercial transport, trucking, shipping, maybe even aviation, it's the exact opposite. It's one of the only real solutions we have to clean up industries where gigantic batteries just aren't practical. And this leaves us with one final, giant question to think about. Is this new future in commercial trucking enough to save the entire hydrogen ecosystem? Can trucking alone drive enough demand and investment to finally make green hydrogen cheap and build out the infrastructure we need? That is the multi-billion-dollar question that huge companies are betting on as we speak. So there you have it, the two very different faces of hydrogen. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more like it, please make sure you subscribe to AutoStats. In our very next explainer, we're going to tackle a topic you've been asking for: all-wheel drive. We'll dive into what actually makes systems like Quattro, xDrive, and symmetrical AWD different from each other. You really won't want to miss that one.
Thanks for watching.